Hello, and welcome back to this tutorial series on Unreal Engine audio. Today, we're going to start going into the mixing side of video game audio. What we've been doing so far in our video game level has primarily involved placing specific actors and tweaking their parameters to get it to sound the way that we want. This is great when setting up these actors preliminarily, but what if you find that later in the process, you find that you don't want your area loops to be as loud? Or what if the sounds in one area need to be brought up to be a little bit louder? It would be a hassle to go through and raise the volume of every single actor in the level. So Unreal Engine makes this much easier by using sound classes. If you've been watching through all the previous tutorials, you'll have heard me mention sound classes in passing. A sound class is a tool in the Unreal Engine that allows you to group sounds together, organize a sound hierarchy, and manipulate parameters of all of the sounds affected by that class. Every sound imported into the game has the option to be qualified under a sound class. This can be found in the Details panel by double-clicking on either a sound wave, which we can see right here, or even a sound cue, which we can see right over here. Let's navigate to our sound classes folder in the content browser to see how we currently have sound classes set up. So if we go back to audio, then we go to sound classes and mixes, we can see all of the sound classes that we have currently created within the level. But the one that I am interested in is the Epic Audio Hierarchy. When we open up the sound class, what we are greeted with is the Details panel and the graph. The Details panel shows us the details of whatever class we have selected, in this case the Epic Audio Hierarchy. The great part about sound classes is that these parameters affect every sound that is assigned to this class. For example, if I wanted to change the volume or pitch of a group of sounds in an area, let's say the ambient sounds, instead of changing the volume on every actor, I would just turn down the volume in the sound class. This saves you a lot of time as well and helps you stay organized in your level. One thing to keep in mind with parameters like volume and pitch is that they act as multipliers. This means that if you had a sound in your level that was set to 0.5 volume, and change the volume of the sound class to 2.0, what that would mean is that your sound in the level would play at 1.0 volume, instead of being set to whatever this volume of the class is. To talk you through a few more of these settings, we first have the attenuation distance scale, which again is a multiplier that allows you to affect the attenuation of every sound in the class. Then it's followed by child classes and passive sound mix modifiers. I'm going to be coming back to child classes later in this tutorial, and passive sound mix modifiers will be covered in a later tutorial. So moving on, we've got the routing tab. This tab is primarily used for surround sound listening with a 5.1 or 7.1 speaker setup rather than using headphones. This first option is the LFE bleed, which determines how much of the signal will be routed to the low frequency effects channel, which usually utilizes the subwoofer. The voice center channel volume alters how much of a signal is sent to the center speaker in a 7.1 or 5.1 setup, and this is primarily used for dialogue in order to make it sound extra clear. You can also send the sound only to the center speaker using the center channel only button. The last setting in this area has to do with audio volumes, which we talked about in the last tutorial. If we were to have this checked, this would allow ambient volumes and audio volumes to be applied, in which case the reverb and the different effects would be applied to your sounds. The Legacy tab contains parameters carried over from older times, such as what output target you want, the ability to apply a radio filter, and being able to put it to a master EQ. You can also qualify the sound as being used for an interface or for music. The Submix tab is another tab that we will be going over in a later tutorial. Finally, the Modulation tab allows you to modulate either the volume, pitch, high pass, or low pass by adding a modulator. I won't be covering creating a modulator in this tutorial, but if there is interest, please let me know. If we take a look at the graph, we can see the hierarchy that I mentioned earlier. Every sound in the level is attached to another in this hierarchy tree, and it all leads back to this Epic Audio Hierarchy. This is where the child classes come into play. One thing mentioned in previous tutorials is the idea of inheritance. classes can be derived from another in order to create a child class. So if we go over here to the General tab and drop this down, we can see that the Epic Audio hierarchy has 3 child classes: SFX, Dialogue, and Music. This means that any settings applied to the Epic Audio hierarchy will also be applied to every child class in the tree, all the way down to things such as the fairies. This can really help you organize and mix your levels, as you can mix things as far down the tree as you want, but then if you want to do groups of sounds, you can just work your way up the hierarchy to apply those effects to everything. While this structure of hierarchy, with having a main hierarchy and then the child classes of SFX, Dialogue, and Music, is very common for film and video games, you do not need to create your classes in this manner. You can make whatever classes you want in order to fit the kinds of sounds that you have in your game, and this will definitely vary from video game to video game. That brings us to the end of our tutorial on sound classes. In the next tutorial, you'll learn more about applying mixes to your audio and classes. And as always, I will see you in the next tutorial.